Okay, awesome. All right. Hi, guys. I'm going to be going over this breakfast time problem here, which is essentially just asking us to go over this code here. And given that this code compiles with no errors, which we can see here that it does, we're asked to fill out the corresponding environment diagram. All right, so let's get started. I have redrawn the environment diagram here and also copy pasted the code as well. So let's get started. So the first line here, we see that we are defining a new variable called breakfast. And we're having it refer to a list with two elements, toast and croissant. Another thing to note is that this is a globally defined variable because this is getting defined globally. So we would expect this variable to exist in the global frame. So we go here, we see breakfast, and we see that it hasn't been assigned to anything yet. So let's change that to its new list with these values. Okay, so here we have updated the values of the values of breakfast, the globally defined variable, to point to this list with these two elements, toast and croissant. All right, so now we are ready to go on to the second line, where we are also globally defining another variable called confiture, and this has a value of 10. And so we can see here in the global frame that it's already been done for us. So we are ready to move on to the next line that is getting globally defined. And that is this function called tartine. And so we go back to the global frame. We see that tartine has already been, it already has been updated for us. And so we don't need to change anything for that. Basically this is saying that this is a function called tartine with this input jam, and this is saying that it has a parent that is global because this function exists in the global frame. So, all right, we've defined this function called tartine already, so let's move on to the next thing getting defined globally. And we see here that that is another function called hot drink. All right, so let's go back to the global frame. We see that some of it's already defined for us, that it's a function called hot drink with this input argument of te, but then we see here that we're missing information on its parent. So take a couple seconds to pause the video and think about what the parent of hot drink should be. And I'll give you a hint, it's very similar to some things that we've already defined previously in the global frame. Okay, so hot drink, because it is a function that is defined in the global frame, its parent would be global. All right, and this is similar to the function that we defined here with tartine, because these are both functions that are globally defined, and as a result, their parents are both going to be referring to like the global frame. Okay, let's move on to the next line, that the next thing that is getting instantiated globally, and that is a variable called plate. And we see here that plate has a little bit of a confusing expression here that we will break down later. Let's just make sure that plate exists in the global frame. See here that it does. Okay, so now let's break down what this whole expression is. Okay, so we see here that plate is first calling tartine on this value, on this variable confiture. And we see here that confiture in both the code and in the environment diagram, that this variable has a value of 10. So let's go to the frame for the function tartine right here, and we can see here that, this is a function tartine parent global, which we already have defined up here. But we see here that we have an input value of jam, and for jam we are passing in this variable called confiture with a value of 10. So our argument value, which is jam, would be equal to 10 because we were passing in this value into the tartine function. So yeah, jam is 10. And so then I already had the check mark next to it. But we have a condition here that is checking to see if jam mod 5 is equal to 0. And I did have the check mark here earlier, but the answer is that yes, it does, because we can check here because jam's value is 10, and 10 is a multiple of 5. So 10 mod 5 would be equal to 0. And so therefore, this condition would pass, and we would be able to go on to line 6. And line 6 is asking us to basically take this first element of breakfast because it's indexing 0. So we look here and we already know that we're going to be doing some kind of change with the first element of the list that breakfast is referring to. And we see here that we want to add this string called jam to whatever is within that first element of the list that breakfast is referring to. So let's go back to the global frame because that's where breakfast is defined. We go to the list here and we go to the first element right here. And here is where we're supposed to add this substring called jam. So let's make that change. Or I can just add it outside and then just put it back in. So we just basically modify the string in the first. Okay, there we go. You basically just modify the string in the first element of the list that breakfast is referring to and update that. So now breakfast is no longer pointing to, its first element is no longer jam, it is now toast jam, because we have finished running through line 6. Okay, and now line 7, we've gotten to the return statement of this function, which is return hot drink of 8. And so now what this line is saying is that we're not returning a function. We are returning whatever this function is returning, because we are calling hot drink on a value of 8. And so this right here is going to return is whatever hot drink with the input value of 8 returns. So what this means is that we have to basically call hot drink on this value 8, and whatever that returns is what we're going to return in this function. And so what that means is that we are essentially returning the same thing as hot drink, because we are calling hot drink on a value. So that means that in this environment diagram, we would want to reflect that, because hot drink is going to return something, whatever it is. We don't know what it is, but here we know that we are calling hot drink on a value. And so whatever that function returns with any type of value is what we want to return as well. And so that is why the return values of tartine and hot drink are both going to be referring to the same thing here, which is what we have to figure out. All right, so we still don't know what this is, what both of these functions are going to be returning. But we do know that we're returning the value of calling hot drink on a value of 8. So let's go to the hot drink frame function here, and let's fill that out. We already see here that we Did not, so we already figured out here that its parent is going to be global. So let's quickly update that here. All right. Okay. So going back to this return statement here, hot drink of 8. And so if we look at the hot drink function here, we see that it has its argument has a variable name of Tay, and so that's what we're going to be referring to as its input to the function. So because we're putting in we're calling hot drink on the input value of 8, Tay is going to have a value of 8 because that is the argument that we are putting into this function. All right, and then so we've established the argument values already for this function hot drink. So let's go to the next line to see what else we're going to be doing within this function. So we see here that it's breakfast.append of Tay. So we see here that this line here, line 10, is essentially modifying the list that breakfast is referring to. So let's go back up to the global frame, go to breakfast, go to the list that it's referring to, and we're appending Tay. So let's add the value of Tay into this list, which is 8. All right. And now it's asking us to return lambda of Choco. And with this function, we essentially want to do Choco plus Tay. All right. So now that we've gone into this hot drink function, we know that we know the return type of the hot drink function and that it's going to be returning a lambda. All right. So here we can start to fill out what we already know of this return type. That is that it is a function lambda and that its parent is hot drink. Okay. So you can say hot drink here, or you can also, just for shortness, you can also say F2, just to keep it concise when you're writing these out super fast. So yeah, I'll just put F2 here just for conciseness. But yeah, so that's essentially the same thing. F2, hot drink, same thing. We're referring to this frame right here. But yes, now we have filled out the return types of, now we know what tartine is going to be returning, and now we know what hot drink is going to be returning. It's returning this lambda function that is basically doing some addition of 2 variables here. So we see here that within this lambda function, we are passing in a variable, right? So let's keep this in mind as we go back to line 7, because we've already done line 11 where we're returning a lambda function, right? And so now we go here to line 7, and we see here that it's also pointing to this function right here, right? And so now when we go back to plate, just for this instance here, tartine confiture, this is essentially returning, let me do it this color actually. This is essentially returning this right here, right? Because to go over that again, tartine is returning hot drink of 8, and so tartine is returning whatever hot drink returns, and hot drink is returning a lambda. So that means tartine is also going to be returning a lambda, right? So to break this down even more, now we know that it's a lambda function, right? So we know that it's a lambda function with that we're adding the argument plus the value of Tay. So we know that Tay is 8, right? From this frame right here in F2. So we have 8, but then we also know that we have this 2 right here. And this is serving as the input to our lambda function. So this 2 is acting as the input to the lambda function. So this is Choco, right? And we see that here. Let's also update this frame as well, just to help us as we step through this. And its parent is F2, right? So we see here, Choco is equal to 2, right? Because this is returning a lambda function. And so we know that it's Choco plus 2, and this is 10. So this right here is returning the value 10. And then we can update that and the plate as well. So this is what the finalized environment diagram would look like. And so to kind of go over the questions above, the return value of the F1 frame. So that's part A. So that's kind of like this right here and this. So we go back here and we see that this is the lambda function. So we would want to fill out this. And then next it's asking us the parent frame of the hot drink function in the F2 frame. So let's go to the F2 frame. The parent function is global. All right, so we pick global. And then next it's asking us the parent of the lambda function, the F3 frame. So we go to the F3 frame. We see here that its parent is F2 because this lambda was defined in the F2 function. So therefore its parent would be F2. And so pull that out here. And so now it's asking what the value of breakfast is in the global frame when the environment diagram is complete. So here we go to the global frame breakfast, and this is the list that we have. So it would be toast, jam, and then croissant, and then the value 8, right? And then now it's asking us the value of plate in the global frame. And we can see here that it's 10. Okay, so that is it for this question.